We'll close the day by looking at collaboration between developers, designers, and PMs. So let's give a warm welcome to Morgane.
Yeah, this is better. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I was chatting with some of you earlier today, and when I said that this was my topic, someone said, "Ooh, this sounds like a horror story." And I'll try not to talk too much about horror, and it's not going to be a talk about organizational psychology or management. I really want to share more about concrete experiments I've been running at my company that I'll introduce in a short while, about things that work for us in kind of changing or shifting the roles and try to stop fighting between, the usual PM, devs, design. And yes, for this, once upon a time, here am I, head of design in a French financial group called Société Générale. So it's a 160 years old company. So as you can see, let's say it's not digital native, it's not AI native, but it have done a lot of things, such as financing the Eiffel Tower. And just to give you a bit of context, where I work is in the investment banking division. So think of it of providing financial services to startup, to European banks, and it can go anything from giving access to markets or financing, ships, solar energy, this kind of thing like that. And so this is me going in this very established, mature company saying, hey, have you heard about the magnificent product trio, dev, design, and former PM, trying to explain to different teams doing some kind of what we call evangelism about how we should tackle digital products. But then I think in the last 12 years, I've seen everything happen in my company and I have heard everything. Because one confession I have to make is this model, this magnificent trio, is supposed to be smooth, right? It's the thing that we're supposed to do to work all well together, be happy ever after. But like a French philosopher said, hell is other people. Jean-Paul Sartre. And I remember when I was at school studying this, it's not that necessarily people are stupid and we don't like to work with people who are not like us. It's more that people's point of view, and especially in the tech world, I think, because sometimes we are so dogmatic, can trap us into boxes, into things that we're not, or that we could be, but they have decided we're just a designer. So I know this quote is a bit philosophical and it's a long day, so I have found a meme on the internet to illustrate this. It is called a perception matrix. Have anyone seen this before? Okay, we have maybe 2, 3, 4 hands. Yes. Okay, so this is how people perceive each other, but also how others perceive them. On the diagonal, it is amazing. It's how we perceive each other. So devs, they all think, and here we are, top scientists doing experiments, designers. Of course, there's always, more or less recently, but we love to quote Steve Jobs, PMs running the world. And as I said, this is the diagonal, right? So this is the happy path, let's say, because elsewhere it's how other people see us. And how do we see devs? How designers are seen by devs? Show of hands, who's on the design side here? Okay, who's on the dev QA side? And who's on the business PM side? Okay, so we have half design, half dev, and we have a very courageous man up there representing the PMs, right? So how do you see us? Just adding a lick of paint, right? But also, we're not kind to our developers because sometimes we think they lack emotional intelligence. They might see us as factory lines. And sometimes we also wonder, what do PMs do all day? Yeah, right? And also, as designer, they just love breaking our perfect design, right? So this is the illustration of the French philosopher. So are we doomed to hate each other, yet we have to work together? And we've been sold this, love story of working in trio on product. And also, if you've been on the internet, which I'm sure you are, there's this narrative going around, right? So the past, we have defined roles, and now the present is kind of like we are kind of merging close together, and the future is going to be everyone, no roles builders, which is one of the topics we had just before in the panel. And I have to say that, everything else in the world, the macroeconomic world, inflation, cost cutting, reorgs, pivot of projects, I think it sells this narrative, and it's even like stronger, especially to a management, that, this is really where we should be headed. And we had actually a lot of, news about, the future of roles and, everyone being builders and having like one-person team like this. So, wait, show of hands. Who have seen The Substance? Mr. Mimo? Yes? Okay. Couple of you. When I watched this movie, honestly, I was thinking of the Project Prio, when she has like different parts of her body but mashed together. And just to say, I am not an AI Luddite or AI denier. As part of my role of global head of product design, I also have a local hat, which is UK AI lead, which is deployment of AI tool for our employees. And on the side, I actually use AI tools myself a lot. And it's not going to be the theme of the topic today, but I have a crochet business, and I've been able to vibe code a tool that gives me 5 stars on Etsy. So just to say, I make money out of vibe coded tools. So I am not an AI Luddite. To show you my beautiful work, it's touch screens. You can drag and drop the animals. I was very proud of it, and people were saying that they love the tool. So just to say, I have played with AI, but I think as an expert, and especially in our company, we have the mission to make informed decisions and explain our point of view with informed opinion on what works or not in our context. So the 3 themes I'd like to touch on today are the following: who should code, who should talk business, and who should design. And okay, if I want to do a short version, yes, of course the devs code, and of course the PM do the business, and of course designs. Right, so should we end here? Well, I think honestly, like anything that is very hyped today, those are not actually the most relevant questions. We tend to be fixated a lot on tools and those questions. And so for each theme, I will share a bit how we try to think about it, and 3 experiments we've been running to kind of change this kind of co-living together in our product trios. So, and also because it's not just about me talking for 1 hour, I will take questions at the end of each theme, especially for the first one and the second one. So first, the first question, who should code? I think a better question is actually how can we work on code together? Because I'm sure you agree at the end of the day, what really matters is what gets shipped and pushed to production. It's what people see or agency. But yet, again, quoting Jean-Paul Sartre, hell is the other. On projects, I mean, I don't know for you, but I've definitely heard in the last, 12 years, designers say, have you looked at my specs? Or the PM saying, oh yeah, those UX fixes, okay, but we'll prioritize them later, which means never. Okay, so maybe it's not just me. And this one is actually a real quote of someone on a project. He was like, oh, honestly, given the quote I received for what I think is just a label change in a dropdown, I'm not really convinced I can ask this to my dev team. So it's not easy to work together, right? And yet, I think we spend a lot of time, so obviously those are the tools in my company, but they're different in all companies, kind of translating each other. Okay, this is my attempt at drawing the Rosetta Stone, for those who will have recognized that, which is obviously business talk in PowerPoint or Notion or Word, then designers primarily in Figma, and then devs primarily in dev tool like GitHub. And again, this is not bad because sometimes we need those artifacts, but we don't need those artifacts for everything. And so the real questions, kind of the extending question, instead of like getting fixated on who should code, is actually how can we spend less time translating those artifacts where we don't need to do that and work on code together. So as I said, I'll share 3 ways we've been doing this at my company. And let me just add as well, it doesn't need to involve AI. Obviously, AI helps on this, but there's definitely things we can do without, maybe using AI is an excuse, but without necessarily using Gen AI. So the first one, again, it sounds like a given, but it's so important, is trying to align on the same tools. Kind of an extension of what Jean-Paul Sartre said. Tools put us in boxes, and licensing and cost of licenses also put us in boxes. So what we've been trying to do as the design team, and you can see 2 examples here, is to run our design operation. So, all our design rituals, things we do, we use actually GitHub, like the ticketing system, same as the dev. And you can see here I have like a list of topics, and then we also use templates for issues, and we've been doing that for years. Actually, I think this came as a suggestion from one of our designer who was really dev-friendly, let's say. And it's been amazing because we can find, we can assign, it's easy to find. So this has been working very, very well. And it doesn't take much once you've done this and moved everyone to GitHub, although obviously at first it might be a bit intimidating for a designer who never used GitHub, to actually start contributing to GitHub repos for real projects. So these second screenshots are examples of how we run the design system. You can see we have a backlog of things we want to work on. Then we have the design phase, then what is ready for dev, what is done. And also, everyone who has an issue, whether a dev or a designer, can open a ticket on GitHub and qualify the issue. We've ever seen PMs or product manager do it, because again, once we're in the same tool, it's kind of more natural to interact this way. I will put at the end the link to Medium, because if you want to dive a bit more on how we operate all this, you can find the full article. Once you've done that, and I think this is true for especially any devs who want to work better with their designers and PM, is kind of expand this comfort zone. As I said, initially it might be a bit intimidating for a designer to use GitHub, and maybe they'll prefer Figma Make because we are more into Figma, right? But what we really want to reach, and that's what we've been doing over the year at Société Générale, is the comfort zone being obviously Figma. And today, Figma is still a tool of choice for anything, for concepts, FigJam actually. And we do need sometimes to do high fidelity prototype for testing. So that's all good. But then what we started to do a bit more is review in the browser. So what we used to do is, do UI analysis and gaps, whether by email or Figma or Word. Actually, you can you have to learn the HTML box model and CSS of a design system, but then you can inspect your browser, look at the code, and play with it. So instead of just saying, hey, there's like a gap of 10 pixels, you can try to say, is the margin, a padding, kind of speak more like in the real language of the devs. And you may have recognized, some people may have recognized, this is kind of like a normal coaching method, right? You have your comfort zone and you kind of expand. And once you're ready and comfortable doing review in the browser, actually a lot of us have started, and I have to say I forced no one in the team, but it's just easier to talk this way instead of actually sending PowerPoints and Figma links of UI reviews. It's actually creating UI reviews in tickets. So this one is a real example of someone in the team, and it might be a bit small here. What you can see here is instead of saying, oh, there's a shift or whatever, they're using CSS classes from our design system and giving the right modification directly to the dev. And as you know, in coaching, this is not where we stop, because when you're comfortable with that, you can expand a bit more. And what was the learning zone becomes the comfort zone. And the next stage is actually doing UI reviews in PRs. So now you're comfortable, you understand the design system, how it works in the browser. You can go directly and try to find the classes in the code repo. And I have to say PMs who are okay to learn to work this way can do it too. We have PMs today who change directly translation in the JSON files. So instead of, they could create a ticket, I suppose, they could send an email, but the ones who are kind of comfortable enough, they can go directly, create a pull request to change those files instead of going through 3 tools to do this change. I want to focus on the danger zone here, because I feel like with AI, the temptation might be jumping from one stage to the other too quickly. And the way I try to explain this is without, and we had this, I think this morning, Dalia, who mentioned having an expert in the loop. Without having an expert who understands, the design system constraints, the context of the company, it's very tempting just to push any design that might be generated, but you will not be able to recognize at which stage of degradation this is, like how much drift has happened between your intent and actually what was produced. And when I say that, I'm not saying that we shouldn't use AI at all, remember. But actually, I think especially it makes more sense for us is to actually use AI as a technical coach. So this screenshot here is, I think I mentioned that at the panel, but we have an internal code pen. It's just because obviously as a bank, we can't have things out there. So this is kind of the internal version that we built that comes preloaded with our design system. And so this is actually what I saw a trainee in the team. I think he was 1 month in, so Mosh was 1 month in the team. And he was basically trying to vibe code the thing he was designing in Figma. And I even got to ask his prompt. He said, you are now a front-end development expert, and you're going to help me improve this code. It's very interesting because honestly, before, it would take us 3 months, roughly, to teach someone how, like a designer, to teach the basics of HTML, CSS to a designer. They will go on Coursera or Code Academy, do the classes, and then we'll give them some examples. So roughly it will take 3 months for them to understand. Mosh was 1 month in, but it's very interesting is that basically he had no clue what was happening. So it was a lot of like back and forth test and maybe waste of tokens, I don't know. But he was able to produce something, but it still took him 3 months to really understand how things work and being comfortable doing UI reviews in the browser. What's also interesting is once you have access to this tool, and I think this is actually also a real example that we had on a project, is you can have those pieces of UI and work better with the developer. So in this example here, we have a designer. They were working in a meeting with the devs, and he was trying to understand why there was a layout shift when he was scrolling the area. And so again, because he was using AI as a technical coach, he was able to better understand and better articulate the problem with the developer. So on this first part, on the question, who should code, I really think a better question to ask is, how can we work together? Because sometimes we don't need to spend so much time spending time on artifact. Maybe another example I can give you here is, unless we want to test with clients all the viewports of an interface, usually we just design one, and then the designer will give the CSS query for the responsive part of it. And we will test it directly in UAT or dev environment. Because again, here, it wasn't unnecessary to do 5 variations of screens. And so how to do that? Well, is start using the same tool to at least have a common ground to speak to each other. What we've been doing, and I think it works very well, is kind of expand. And I think earlier today we call it democratization, but expand designers and PMs' comfort zone gradually, and use AI as a technical coach. I'm going to stop here now and take any questions on this part if anyone has any question. No question. Yes? Is it code or engineering? How do we define the difference? Oh, sorry, the mic.
So code or engineering, right? Engineering is how you're gonna architect the application and the changes that you're gonna be making, and understand if you move this thing, there are probably the repercussions that it could have. And code is how do you talk to the machine to do these changes?
Oh, yes. So it's a very important point indeed. When we work on the interface, it's a static UI element. We don't have the backend yet. and the developer hasn't chosen whether to use Angular or React. So the framework, we haven't done it yet. We're just seeing what is rendered in the browser, exactly like when we were designing in the browser, inspecting code, etc. But then, obviously, once everyone agrees on the UI piece, it gets basically built properly, and the choice of how you want to build, your components and things like that, made by the developer. But actually, as I said, with the comfort zone, I have actually known designers who are comfortable enough, especially with GitHub Copilot, they can find the different components and, for example, change the little CSS elements themselves. So I suppose we went from static code to kind of a bit more into the engineering world, understanding where are things and where the architecture, and being able to find elements in the code repo. Now, if we talk about architecture, we're not yet working with the enterprise architects. That's a separate topic for the foundations. Oh, yeah. Another question? Yes.
Hi, data engineer here. So I've seen the focus being around a lot of front-end code. So in reality code, and a lot of times actually product design, it's about delivering a product, sometimes even a data product. So it's more about actually the behavior and the interaction and less about actually the UI. And I see in general the focus being on the code generated regarding the UI. But in reality, behaviors can be designed regarding backend or actually how the data may be presented. Because sometimes the end goal is, it might not be the UI, it's actually whether I like it or not, the Excel that are going to download, to be honest. So regarding this, where do you see the designer collaborating in that aspect? Because I could see interacting, actually working together in the same sense that as an engineer, I need to understand the business objective and how it behaves in order to actually design it.
Yeah, this does absolutely not replace all the design workshop with the back-end teams and the front-end teams and the business. So, for example, we have traditional workshops for status, for example, transaction status. It's probably going to be a diagram of flows, right, that we need to approve. So obviously, at each step, we need the backend team to tell us, how the API works and everything. So this does not replace that part. So yes, that was much more talking about the static point. Yes, you have.
Sorry, that's really interesting. When do you have these workshops? Is it before or after?
Oh, hold on. Is it in my third part? Okay, I'll answer it now. So for what? I
mean, the workshop with defining the flows, the data that we're going to have, the contracts, what we need to have, when.
Okay, so much earlier. So before any UI is generated.
Before, okay.
Yes. I mean, after, it's a bit late, no? So hopefully people agree it's a bit late when you do it after. But yeah, I think obviously we want them, especially, the dev teams backend especially involved, even when we do the user flow, because sometimes, and for real, we have to redo whole projects because, we realized the backend system was not compatible with the user flow. But once you reach all this, and obviously when you're at the definition of the interface itself, then obviously that's where we go faster, especially with the little code pen that we have here. But for sure, and as I said, it does not replace all artifacts, only some of them. And maybe to look back to what we said previously, it's our expert judgment to know when to go faster and when not to replace the work that needs to be done. All right, so actually you talk about business. Perfect transition, thank you. Who should talk business? Well, again, I think we sometimes get fixated. And a few years ago, everyone was like, oh, should designers talk business? Might not be the best question, and we may get fixated again on the wrong question. I think a more interesting question is, how can we share the same priorities? And again, on projects, sometimes it can seem difficult, like hell, because I've definitely heard designers say to PMs, but what do you want exactly? Just tell me. Oh, I'm not here for that, I do design. Oh, I'm not here for that, I do line of codes, for example. And apparently there's this rogue running around in the PM world, which is a designer is just a PM who knows how to use Figma. So again, working together is difficult, right? But I think all this is obviously made even more difficult because initially it was supposed to be simple. You know, if you have a one-person company, you choose the CEO of yourself, and you have your clients, and then as the team expand, operations scales, that you start to have your verticals, and those people need support, and then slowly but surely you start those silos coming up, and this is when everyone has their own priorities and their own, definitions of success in every year. So I think a follow-up question is, how can we reduce our silo mindset? Because again, it's a mindset with less finger pointing and share the same priorities. So again, 3 ways we've been doing it. So the first one is, again, trying to align common ground. And the way we've been doing it at Société Générale is the discovery doc. Historically, business might be scoping stuff in PowerPoint, Word, Notion. Then designers will be scoping their design work in Figma, FigJam, or any kind of whiteboard tools. And there is very often engineering, they have their own documentation tool that they generate. But again, this is very putting us in boxes. And at least what we try to do is have a common lean canvas for everyone. And it took some years to convince, but like now actually, whether it's on the dev side, on the design side, we do not engage until we have something defined and agreed with business, which is, again, seems very easy to answer, to fill those boxes, but you'd be amazed how people are not aligned sometimes. And only when we have this and we share it, and everyone, and you mentioned, people being aware on the engineering side, is aware of why they're working on these projects, this is when we go ahead. Another way of doing it, and I think maybe this one is a bit more controversial, is to actually adopt the mindset of cost of doing business in the design team and dev team. What I mean by that is, if you ask a designer, half of you here, of course we want to do everything perfectly to the maximum level. The full, design cycle, the research part, then the iteration, concept, prototyping, information hierarchy, all down to usability testing, etc. But actually, there's a lot of cases where we might not need to do all this, or maybe, rather should I say, we might not have the best condition to do that. To have access to the user, is there any deadline? Is it like a regulatory request that that thing needs to be live and we don't have a choice, right? We don't have time to chat to anyone. So what we've been doing in the team is really, in the same way as companies, they can't focus on every single client at the same level. So very often, company has tiering, or at least they have, different types, whether you are clients from a company or like as a retail client. So the same way on the business side, they have tiering. So we have the same. So we only go design-led when agreed with project, when they really want to work on the client experience. And there's times where we just do a UI review. For example, I've been joking previously that if the project is about having a filter area and a table of results, we already designed this 1,000 times, it's been documented in our design system, you actually don't need a designer to do that. So maybe we'll just do a UI review. And it doesn't mean that we don't bring any value, but it'll be different. And we all agree the effort, at least with our project peer. And obviously, because nobody likes to say that they're not important, everyone, when we say, okay, you're not important for design, they try to argue. And so we have introduced this kind of hackathon design challenge way, which is, okay, not the full project will be design-led, but maybe a part of it, where it matters, where we have impact, will be design-led. And for that, even in the team, my designers kind of like that. I kind of kidnap 2 designers so they can work in co-design with the project on a time-boxed period. And the time-boxed period is super important because otherwise it kind of drags and it's not a hackathon or design challenge mode anymore. So the last way, and this is where I'm bringing AI again, is to use actually AI to speak business. We had a great talk earlier today from Ben, I think, who was sharing how he understood how to better sell research by more understanding the business context and not doing more research. Research kid knows how to do that. And I think, and this is especially true for my junior designers, but also for developers in general, when we are experts, it's very hard for us to change our mindset and our point of view so that we speak the same language as business. And sometimes if we do it, it can sound a bit weird. I wouldn't expect, for example, my designer to suddenly talk about EBITDA or leverage ratio or, I don't know, all kind of financial acronyms. And that's not what we ask. but we need to be able to explain what we do in words and language that the business people will understand or PMs will understand. And with AI tools today, it's great because, well, you can use this kind of prompt, which is, you are now a McKinsey consultant, and you're going to help me explain my problem using the Minto pyramid. Someone said earlier in a talk that, those tools are amazing if you know how to prompt them well or what to, ask. And this comes actually from a personal experience, which is, I'm joking because as the head of design, sometimes I tend to provide editing services to my team, which is they don't know how to explain something. They write a draft, I look at the draft, and I rewrite the draft so that it lands better. And actually, I realized that actually there's not a lot of people who do those kind of editing services, but maybe also I forgot to mention I did a business school before moving into design, so for me it's quite natural, but I'm like, why don't you explain it this way? Obviously, as expert, we want to explain everything, all the facts, and it's difficult to do it. So again, with this kind of prompting, it helps very well. And the Minto pyramid, actually, has anyone heard about the Minto pyramid? 2 hands. Okay, all of you know you're going to speak Minto pyramid when you, I don't know, your next meeting. It's super important to explain. And actually, people who are consulting in this kind of consulting firm, that's what they learn, how to deal with people who are super busy. They really need to learn some fact and how to address the problem. And what's great with the Minto pyramid is basically it reverses the narrative structure. Let me show you an example here. So one of my junior designers might be saying something like this, but again, it translates well with for the dev world. So the product owner had a new idea. I did a low fidelity prototype. You have to, the jargon here, right? I have to explain. Then I organized usability testing sessions. They liked it, but then the dev said it's not possible. Well, honestly, this sometimes sounds like this. When you're not into, and actually know that I'm doing executive meetings, sometimes people come and they explain things, and I'm like trying to understand where they're getting at, and it really feels like this. Like I had a banana, I draw, then I did zoom, 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 but the banana ate the dinosaur. At the end, you still don't know what they're asking, you don't know why you're having this presentation, you're a bit clueless. Does it speak to you guys? Because I'm hearing laugh. So using the Minto pyramid, and again, now with AI, it's great because you can practice all these discussions for free before your meeting. It's basically reversing the narrative structure. First, you start with the point you want people to take away, because if they're just available 5 minutes and they're suddenly in a hurry to another meeting, at least you have made your points. Then you give your insights, and then only if you need to, you give your support elements. And I know it is so hard to do that every time a design or researcher in my team do a report. They want to put everything because they work so hard. But again, unless we are asked to, we can't do that because people don't have as much time or exposure to those topics. So way to do it, again, using my example, is like, hey, we're meeting today because we need to revisit our priorities. The business said this is important. I've done some user research that confirms it. But obviously, there's an alert raised by the dev team saying it has a major impact, so we need to do some arbitrage using business speak. And also, if they ask questions, standardly, you give the arguments. You don't offload everything so that people are lost and they don't remember what was the main messaging here. All right, so on business, and again, I think here what's really key is when we say talking business, it's not about us suddenly doing an MBA or becoming salespeople. Is really understanding the context around it and how our work relate to that. So a better question is, how can we share the same business priorities? Obviously with our own lens as design and dev and QA, but without, again, trying to fake being business people. Why? Well, it will help have a less silo mindset and maybe do a bit less finger pointing when things go wrong or when we need to fix things. And how we've been experimenting with this, at least in my company, is first have some common ground again, same with tools, have some common discovery docs that everyone has on projects, adopt the cost of doing business, and I know it's difficult, especially on the design side, because we've been taught for many, many years at school to do the design double diamond fully, but it's either you choose in agreement with the project or they choose without you. and use AI to speak business. Again, this is a fantastic tool, and I can tell you that I'm almost a bit sad because my team doesn't need my editing service as much, so there you go, they replaced me. But it's better that they're self-sufficient in explaining and being better advocate of themselves than me correcting people's email all the time. I'm going to pause here again. If anyone wants to ask some question on this section. Yeah, we have a question there.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to ask, who do you define as business people? Like, for example, in many organizations, there is the thinking that, okay, the PM speaks to sales. And how are you handling that? Like, when there is some kind of research findings that you would like to share further, as a designer, as the person doing the research, having the findings, and then getting it in the same common language with business people?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I'll try to be simple in answering it because a designer's favorite answer is it depends. But actually, it really depends because in the corporate investment banking world, I think one thing we have that might not be true for lots of industries. For some products, our internal users are actually exactly behaving like external users. Let me give you an example. An internal trader at my company, probably actually it's the same people who move around in the career path as well, will have the same need than an external trader in a corporate company. The difference, obviously, the internal traders have access to different products, maybe has more rights, but in terms of behavior, it's really similar. So for us, it makes more sense, and obviously you have to advocate for that because a trader's time is super expensive, but it makes more sense to work directly with those people, instead of trying to have some proxy POs. And so very often this type of role, project, we have what we call the PO, so the project owner is someone on the business side who really can also tell us on the business side if there's some, conflicting request, what matters or not according to the business strategy, because at the end of the day, that's how we make them decide. And then we have a PM, so program management, running, like the staffing budget, because obviously they are not going to do that. Then we have project where we don't have access to a real user, kind of like, PO user. And then we may have like a user champion. So for example, it's a proper, PM. And then we have champions that we drag into a design workshop to co-design with them. And then we have projects where basically we don't have access to anyone who can represent the user because it's for real external clients. And then the proxies, for example, working with sales, and then obviously inviting the clients when we have something to do in terms of testing or research session. So it was a thorough answer, but again, projects are different in terms of setup. When we can, we try to have people who can represent the user, but also because in our company, we do have access to those type of people. We can actually demand that. Sorry, I need to take my breath from this. Any other question before I move on? Okay, I don't think I see any hands, so let me move to the last part, which is actually who should design. Especially with all those new tools, and again, we were chatting about this just before in the panel, people having access to, Cloud Design, Figma Make, all this. There's a lot of noise around it, but here again, I don't think that's the right question. A better question to ask is actually how do we improve the customer or the client experience? Because again, very often, actually I just use this answer. It's your bottleneck, just give me access to Figma. Okay, I see people smiling here. I like to joke that it's not because you have access to Figma that you're going to do design, the same way that it's not because you have access to worlds that you're going to write Lords of the Ring, okay? But people think that if they have access to the tools, suddenly they'll be able to self-help themselves. Or, you're getting dragged into something by someone who say, don't worry, it's just a tiny tweak. It'll be quick, I promise. And designer's best answer, as I said, it depends. So again, all this creates a bit of drama on projects and definitely doesn't help us coexist together in a peaceful way. And as I said, we can really get fixated on a tool. It's true that even I don't like having POs, PMs use Figma because then I have to explain what they do is not correct, or they haven't used the design system properly, and try to explain the difference between having something that looks like polished but without any design workshop. For example, on statuses, like no input from backend, it's just an idea coming out of their head, right? And actually, I've seen companies where they said like they gatekeep these developer tools. So designers do not have access to GitHub, or it takes like 2 years to get access to GitHub, or even getting access to clients, being able to go on client visit or client calls. So yes, it's kind of like very tempting to kind of gatekeep with tools, but not with AI anyway. Those tools kind of change, so you can't gatekeep, Cloud Design or Cloud Code. So we need to find a better way to think about those challenges. And again, here, I think a better way to ask this question is actually how might we rethink designers' contribution and improve the customer experience? Let me share 3 ways we've been doing this. And maybe just before going into those 3 examples, I will just give you a bit of context at my company, because the team has always stayed relatively small. I was sharing with someone before, and you might be surprised to hear that in my company, so again, on the financial side, so the corporate investment banking side, the team of design has picked at maybe 20 people, because we always try to kind of only put designers on design-led topics and not on producing screens, for example. And so this is after years or years of doing this, and obviously all this now with AI tools, like everyone is like having those existential crises at the same time. But we didn't have a choice, because we could never scale as fast as tech companies or like new companies who just have greenfield playgrounds. So the first way we've been trying to think the value of design and how to position design, and to make it useful as well for projects, is to have clear rules of engagement. We don't start any project before we have this: a link canvas, which is what I shared previously, a data wishlist, which is all the data we need to play with or have in the interface, and the API list from actually the backend team, just to make sure that we're not going to start designing anything that is, that will take, 10 years to do, backend systems, because then our strategy might be different. And as you can see, none of this is purely design, right? But by doing this, it really helps people think what's a design-led project and what is not a design-led project. Again, if you just need a simple page of filter and table, we have the design system for that. We have a pattern for that. Obviously, we can help you. Just make sure that you use the pattern correctly. But there's no need to use design time for that. I joked previously that we are also sometimes doing design in Excel, and Excel is a great tool for manipulating data and thinking outside of design tools. So here's an example of the data we have to play with on the foreign exchange market. And so before starting any project, we collect this, so the data wish list, and doing this modeling in a spreadsheet. Again, where were we before, right? We're doing this UI snippet, tool that I shared previously. Well, doing this and the designer also putting their hands in Excel allow us to really understand, is there any jargon or is there any duplicate, attributes in this? Also, we can align everyone, because everyone has access to Excel. And if needs be, sometimes we do that. We can even have a step, kind of like design sign-up step of, okay, this is all the data we need. And we have a guarantee that this is good from a client point of view, and this is good also on a backend point of view. And I said I promised I would share something. So this is a personal project, because I couldn't find one that I could share externally. But this is just an example of Excel prototype. And actually, I have even one of my designers who said that he just signed off a prototype done in Excel spreadsheet for his dev to ship. Because again, it was not necessarily a new screen. It was more like an iteration of adding a product. So again, we have the design system, we have the existing template. There's no major impact on the UX part of view, so no need to change the interface. So we can just go directly from Excel to actually dev. I have to say, I've never forced anyone in my design team to use Excel, because they're a bit allergic when they come in the team. And they all somehow kind of ended up being able to manipulate Excel. I think it's part of those tools that might be intimidating if you're not used to use them. But then once you know, it's just so much easier to do a table in Excel than in Figma, for example. Actually, I do not do any table in Figma. It's just way too long. All right. And the third way, and again, this is after years of experimentation, right, and also having limited resources, is trying to think of design as urban planning. What I mean by that is, especially in my company, we're working on a corporate B2B platform. So one product is nice, but we have more than 200 of them. And so when we work on a product, it's not just, okay, is it good user experience or customer experience on this product, but does it make sense in the bigger, platform? Because a client might use one of those services and other services. Does it use the design system properly? Because again, if they do one audit trail in one tool, will they understand how it works in another tool? So all this, actually, we have one team who really is at the core of kind of those design rules of the platform, which is actually the design team. And as you can see here, it's not just one building, it's also different buildings. And so maybe the way I can think of it is obviously enforcing and documenting platform guidelines with our architecture team, actually. Also challenging, is that the real MVP? Because again, we see that the core of all those projects is kind of like urban planning in a sense. Is it a real MVP or is it just a POC? Is there any real value in that? And so we can definitely challenge our projects for that. And also, and this has happened, is kind of using design as a neutral ground, because sometimes we have projects who want to develop duplicated feature, and obviously that kind of creates confusion at the platform level. So we kind of use designers as the Swiss kind of neutral ground to kind of do a study to see where should we put it for the interest of the clients and the user. As I said, also overall consistency, mainly linked to design system, but not only. And definition of patterns for all. I've actually mentioned patterns a couple of times, so maybe the one last example I want to share today with you is how we think about business pattern. And this actually comes from a real experiment. I challenged one of the designers when I asked him to work on a new project. I said, can you list all the features that they need, and can you list if there's anything we've designed before that you can reuse, and can you please try to be, measured and trying to understand how much workload you saved from there. It's a bit small, so I don't know, I'll let you take a picture if you want to have a closer look. But also there's the whole case study on a Medium. But basically, he was able to list everything that he needed. Also, it's anonymized here, but list all the projects that he found a pattern to reuse. And globally, on this kind of very standard service, we could say that maybe 80% of the design workload was saved. Obviously, the time is reinvested, right? It's not that he's doing nothing. Thanks to patterns we have defined in other products. Those patterns, we've done the research, we've done the prototyping, we've done the development, they're live, we have feedback from real users. Obviously, the designer needs to have a judgment on whether it makes sense. Don't just use a pattern because you've seen a pattern, right? So we still need the judgment from the expert. But again, I think it's very tempting, especially when I share this with our management, to say, hey, look, we are doing things 80% faster or whatever. No, because the project still takes time. The difference is, instead of maybe allocating our time or things we've done before, we can focus on things that there's more of a time or that are more specific to that project. And I think as of today, at least, this is how we've been trying to position the design team and also the design system team in terms of IP, we understand obviously how to work on interfaces, but also we understand, for example, how to design a financial audit trail and how to do it at a platform level consistently. My final wrap up for today, and we're not too bad in terms of time. So a trail in transition. Are we all gonna end up like this? I see people like this. Yes, I mean, for my crochet business, I'm perfectly happy to be this because there's low stake, right? But I'm sure you guys don't want us to vibe decide, and vibe code into the financial system. It'd be completely dangerous and irresponsible. And I think, again, it might not be the right questions because the better way to think about all this is how can we work on code together? how can we share the same business priorities, because at the end of the day, we work in the same company, and how can we design, rethink design contribution, so it's not just producing screen, but also using, having more impact for design. How? Well, as we said, using the same tool where possible, expanding people's comfort zone gradually, using AI as a technical coach, not a replacement, aligning discovery docs, thinking cost of business even for design and developers, engineers, and using AI to speak business. And on the design side, as I just said, no, having clear rules of engagement for design, so we know what's design-led, what is not, what is fake design, and what is just, for example, and it's totally okay, by the way, if we just need to do some prototyping for a business concept, great, but let's not say that it's for the customer experience. It's just for you to validate your budget. And we do that as a favor because you know that real design is not supposed to be that. Then thinking outside of design tools, so again, using Excel if it's easier for people to think and explain what they want and explain a problem. And using design as your brand planning, because we don't design in isolation. It's not just one service, it's a set of services in our case. So at the end of the day, tools are great, but I think what's really happening today, and I think what's really is exciting for me, is rather than thinking about roles, who gets to design, who gets to decide, who gets, I don't know, to code, it's kind of, we have those boundaries that are a bit more malleable. And instead of thinking, roles and projects, I felt that really push organization to have a more human approach of those teams, which is when you form a team, thinking complementarity. Which is already the case today. Sometimes I know that I need a designer who's really good at understanding design systems, so front-end, at least HTML, CSS on projects, and sometimes I need a designer who's really good at research. But again, it's a more human point of view of allocating people on project rather than thinking defined roles. As I mentioned, I mentioned a couple of articles. They're available in a Medium article. So here's a QR code that you can scan if you want to have a look. And I know it's been a long day, so thank you so much for coming to this final talk and for your questions and your attention. Thank you. I think we have time for a couple of questions. Where's the MC? She went for it.
Hi there, this is me. I'm Panos.
Yes.
Thank you for this great presentation. Just a question related to the first part of your presentation. Who should code? The logic you showed us is really great. Does it apply to native apps as well, other than web applications or websites?
Probably not, because the model aren't good enough. And actually, I should say, I have designers who, so again, let's say I think they have rebranding themselves design engineers, so who were able to build a few features in React. But I think what they tell me is it's actually taking time for the real developers to review what they do. And in a sense, what gets produced by AI is harder for them to review. So it's great that the designer were able to ship something, and it's React, which is probably one of the most common trained material. Any legacy code, honestly, that's a lot of company trying to sell the services in the financial industry, but we do actually have lots of legacy app and code, and I have yet to see anything that works actually. Also, just to say that my team primarily works on web stack, so React, Angular, so I wouldn't be, I think, able to give you a real informed opinion on that. But my understanding is that the model aren't good anyway.
Thank you.
Another question here in the middle.
Yeah, seeing all this, I just have one more question. When it comes to persuading stakeholders into trying this framework, would you like, I don't know, if you have any tips as a first step into this approach of getting into common ground and persuading the stakeholders, the business, or yeah.
Do you have any reason? Do you have any reason, any worries that that would push back?
Like we don't have the time, not now, maybe later.
But
Hearing this kind of like excuse.
yeah, I mean, okay, so this is where having clear rules of engagement works very well. This being said, I think it really depends on the industry. I work in an industry, but it's kind of, the advice of you have to understand the culture of the company. And obviously being in finance, people have to go through a whole lot of trainings, compliance, etc. So we know that we have procedures that we have to follow. Even in AI projects, we can't do anything we want. Every use case needs to be declared. We need to be audited, right? So people understand there's a procedure to follow. So for us, it was a stretch. But again, once you understand this, it's kind of borrow this mindset, say, hey, to engage design work, this is what we need, the lean canvas, right? And the data, so the different things I said. And funny enough, once you have put that into an established methodology that has been used, nobody questions it anymore. This leads to another problem, where you keep doing things that you started 10 years ago and nobody will question it. So again, that leads to other problem. But I think maybe it takes 1 or 2 tests because you also need to be sure that that's what you want and it works for your company. And once you've done it once or twice and it becomes part of the methodology, I think that's where it becomes harder for people to debate that because it's just part of the rules of engagement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Was that the last question? Yes. Oh, we can stay here. No, we want a beer. Oh, no, one last.
Hello, thank you. It's a really nice and useful framework. However, it sort of felt like the designers are sort of compromising and catering to the other parts of the project, like PMs and designers can learn code to communicate fixes and bugs faster, but can't other teams also cater somehow more to designers and maybe learn design language or whatever?
Yeah. When we ask people to produce the scoping documents and maybe use Excel, we're kind of drawing them into the design process, although we don't call it like this because they might not be interested. But like instead of trying to play in Figma or Figma Make, we say, hey, we actually need to know what data is valuable to you as the business. Can you put that into Excel? And you do whatever you want with Excel borders and stuff. And when we say, you know what, even better, can you create several tabs? Because I know that sometimes the data can be huge, so I need to have some edge cases. What's the best, the breakdown of the most common way, like for example, a data structure versus a client who might have like 1,000 transactions. Maybe a client, to use a real example, client may have on average 10 transactions because we're not going to design the same way. And so basically, without naming it specifically, you're asking them to kind of follow your design inputs, prompts in a sense. So I wouldn't say that design is necessarily compromising. I think it's just, kind of coexisting. And as I said, some POs might be very comfortable doing this. Some people might not be. It's really much a more kind of human-focused way on projects. And doesn't mean that they can't learn, right? So we had definitely, for example, business analysts that we train in doing usability testing because we were short on time and people. And at the end, they actually did enjoy this. So I feel it's like everyone needs to accept to make a step toward the other, and depending on the project and what needs to be done. But actually, funny anecdote, and maybe I'll leave you with this. So not this conference, but I was chatting with the host of another conference in another country, and they're doing professional events, right? And they're doing professional events for devs, for engineers, designers, and business things. And the guy told me, it's always the designer who complain about everything. They don't like the coffee. They're here for a conference, but they're upset about the coffee. And I don't know if it's because of how we've been teaching design. I feel like on the dogmatic side, designers tend maybe to be, okay, I'm not talking about devs debating about React and Angular, right? Because that can be pretty dogmatic too. But on projects and how projects should be carried, I find that it's true that designers can be very dogmatic about it. So obviously for them, it's going to be harder to make a step and accept to change the status quo. That's my, my experience. Maybe we should go for a drink before I share more stories, or they'll be like, with a drink. Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Thank you very much. Hello? Oh, okay. Thank you very much for your talk. It was very insightful, and I think it's a problem that bothers all of us. So before we officially wrap up, we have one more exciting announcement. We are very happy to share that on September 22, WeTest is heading to Thessaloniki. So WeTest SKG is officially happening. Registrations are now open and the program is already available. You can check it out and join us there. Before we close, we also want to take a moment and say thank you. Thank you to our speakers for sharing your stories, your knowledge, and your passion with our community. Thank you to our volunteers who worked behind the scenes, often invisibly, and made everything run smoothly today. Thank you to our sponsors and partner companies for trusting us and supporting this event. Thank you to the tech communities and everyone who helped spread the word and supported WeTest. And of course, thanks to all of you for being here, for your energy, and for making this community what it is. We really hope you enjoyed today as much as we did. And thank you for being part of WeTest.Athens. We are looking forward to seeing you in WeTest at Thessaloniki. Thank you.